Hello everyone, I'm glad to introduce you our game design project, Beyond Earth, a resource management card game by Musta, Sammy, Lee, Justin, me, and Leonard. Lee is our artistic lead. He is in charge of drawing pixel art and designing card backs and overall aesthetic of the game. Leonard is our implementation lead. He is in charge of creating cards and implementing them on Tabletopia. Musta, Sammy, Justin, and me are designing team. We are in charge of designing core mechanics, come up with specific cards, playtesting, and a balancing of overall values.
The setting of the game takes place in the distant future. Biosphere 1, the Earth, is on the brink of total collapse. The newest scientific breakthrough, a planet portal technology, could give humanity a new start. However, teleporting humanity to a distant planet requires an unimaginable amount of energy. The world entrusted 4 of you to find a way to generate sufficient power, but each of you has your own personal motives. Can you find a way to start the planet portal before the crisis grows out of control, or will you fall victim to your own greed?
Beyond Earth is a four-player resource management card game that encourages players to think about sustainability and balance. In the past 100 to 200 years, shareholder capitalism that focuses on getting short-term profits as quickly and efficiently as possible not only pulled millions of people out of poverty, but also wreaked havoc on our environment along the way. Nowadays, we often debate over the matter that if we should sacrifice our economy for our environment or vice versa. Developing and developed countries argue over the need for the development and the need for the environment. And so, what should we really be thinking about is that if we can find a way to sustainably push our economy forward. In Beyond Earth, every player will be assigned a secretive personal goals in the beginning of the game. In order to win, they must fulfill several winning conditions before the end of the game. There could be multiple winners in any given game. However, if every single player is only focused on their own personal goals, the crisis will easily grow out of control and everyone could lose. In our early player testing phase, for example, we found out that a lot of us defaulted to our player for ourselves mentality and only focused on the personal goal. As such, we will often find no winners at the end of the game. So we decided to use these personal goals and change the overall objective of the game in a way to intrinsically motivate the player to think about and balance the personal need versus the world at large.
And talking about hypothetical player base, we believe the game will appeal to people who are interested in resource management, tabletop games, and competition-based strategy games, or who are interested in a futuristic genre. It will also appeal to educators who want to teach students about sustainable development and any topic related to that.
In Beyond Earth, power and the crisis meter are soft timers. Power meter symbolizes the total energy percentage needed to power on the planet portal, while crisis symbolizes the percentage of disarray of the society and the collapse of our ecosphere. Player action and the units could generate or diminish both power and a crisis. When players use this action and a unit to achieve their goals, the power and the crisis will naturally progress. When either the power or crisis reach 100%, the game will end. The power or crisis meter reach 25%, 50%, or 75%, a random event card will be drawn. This event card could positively or negatively change the landscape of the game and make it more interesting. It prevents players to heavily rely on one strategy and make them think on the fly. It also helps the replayability by creating totally different scenario every single game. The game is focused on all around three main resources: silicon, oil, and gold. Silicon is the symbol of technology and clean energy. Many high-tech units and a sustainable power source require silicon as the resources. Oil is the symbol of fossil fuel and the internal combustion engine. While generating more power, it also has high crisis impact. Gold is simply a global currency. Many units and action will not only require oil and silicon, but also gold. All three resources will randomly shuffle in the resource deck, and each player will draw from a deck in the beginning of their turns. Player will need this resource to execute action or purchase units. We also have one very special resource, uranium. You can only obtain it by very specific actions that require a lot of upfront cost, but it's also a requirement for very powerful technology. We also have some soft resources, or per se like different status, such as science, military, and a university. Science and a university give you the ability to build and upgrade the better and the more efficient technology, or use some high-tech actions. Military gives you the power to attack or defend your units.
Another core mechanic is the individual goals. In the beginning of the game, each player will draw from randomly shuffled identity piles. On the identity card, there will be a list of goals each player needs to achieve before the end of the game to win. There are 6 identity types: environmentalist, capitalist, power tycoon, scientist, doomsday cultist, and the warlord. Each individual goal has 2 components, one related to their own personal desire and one related to the power or crisis meters. For example, the capitalist goal is to own the most amount of gold out of the 4 players by the end of the game, while preventing the crisis from filling to the top. And there could be more than one capitalist player in any given game. On the other hand, the Doomsday Cultist has only one goal: prevent the power meter from reaching 100%. These player identity cards are designed to invoke player conflict and player interaction. Since one's identity is unknown to the other players, the players need to deduce the other players' true intentions from their actions, much like global politics. The competitive nature intrinsically motivates players to think about how to best achieve their personal goal. However, if a player becomes overprotective or solely focuses on their personal goal, it could lead to failure for everyone.
So for implementation, we first started by creating the cards that we would need in Photoshop. That includes the unit cards, the role cards, the event cards, and the action cards, and also the resource cards. And then we imported those into Tabletopia, where we set up the game. That included creating the separate decks, the counters for power and for crisis, and the general layout of what the game would look like in the tabletop setting.
So regarding the art design aspect of this game prototype, the painting tools that I chose for the game are a website called Pixel Art, Photoshop, Illustrator, Sai, and something extra. The reason why I use Pixel Art for some art design like icons for the resources is because I believe it's a unique art form that I never tried before, and I think it's both new and easy for me to try out. Besides, some resource icon designs are inspired by the Civilization series, which, as we all know, are a widely known and popular strategy-based resource management game on the market, which also shares a pretty cool graphic design.
Unit introduction. Each player can only purchase 2 units at most each turn. All purchased units come into play tapped. Tapped units do not have any effect. Untap all units at the end of each player's turn. The gold mine, silicon mine, oil refinery cost 3 gold, silicon, or oil respectively. Since players will obtain resources randomly each turn, their function is to provide a stable income for specific resources. There are 2 main power generation units. We want to encourage players to invest and upgrade their power units to higher, more efficient versions, or simply purchase more of the same. Upgrading units do not count towards the 2 unit per turn cap. Solar plants, a source of clean energy, generates no crisis but has a smaller amount of power generation. Can be upgraded to generate more power. Oil plant is a source of fossil fuel energy, generates a large amount of energy along with crisis. Upgrade provide cleaner fossil fuel sources and higher energy output. In addition, there are universities, which are sources of science and requirements for the military academy, armies, a human resource facility that develops the labor force to create a powerhouse for protection and invasion. Some action outcomes are determined by the number of armies you control. A military academy, an advanced human training facility that reduces the costs of armies in order to generate more military power, limited to 1 per player, and reduces the cost of army to 1 gold. You need a university to build it. Carbon absorption plant, a technological center that's job is to reduce the crisis generated by a set amount per upgrade tier. And the nuclear plant, a power plant that produces power by harnessing the power of nuclear energy, requires many resources to be invested and produces energy very quickly. Destroying it causes a huge spike in crisis.
So it's time to talk about action cards. So players can execute as many actions as they wish and afford per turn. This just depends on how many cards you wish to use. Resource expeditions for oil and silicon, gold. Well, this type of action card gives player an option to trade in 2 other resources they don't want for another resource that they want. Resource expedition for uranium, and this one is unique. Only one way, and it's the only way to obtain uranium. It costs a large amount of all other resources and requires a high amount of sciences to achieve. The action card war. It costs 1 of each resource to initiate war against other players, and it compares the amount of military power of both players, and the one with the higher amount of military power gets to destroy 1 unit that the other selected player has, while at the same time generating crisis. Peacekeeping. It costs 1 of each resource and reduces the crisis based on how much military power you have. Embargo. This action card costs 2 gold and requires at least 2 military power, reduces 1 resource drawn for a player at the next turn. Espionage. It costs 2 oil and requires at least 2 military power. It disables 1 unit of the selected player on his turn. Cyber attack. It costs 2 silicon and requires at least 2 sciences. It's a high-tech version of espionage. Disables 1 unit, selected player on his turn.
Alright, to start, we have the environmentalist. You do not want to leave a planet with unhealable wounds. So your main goal is to keep the crisis meter below 50% while contributing to the power progression. There could be up to 2 environmentalists in the same game. Next, we have the capitalists. You want to make as much money as you can. So by the end of the game, you should have the most gold, and crisis needs to be lower than 100%. There could be up to 2 capitalists in the same game. The power tycoon focuses on monopolizing the need for power. So their main goal is to have the highest amount of power production while maintaining a crisis level lower than 75%. There could be up to 2 power tycoons in the same game. The next role is the scientist. As a scientist, you want to push science to its limits to avoid making the same mistakes on this new planet. So, your goals are to have the highest science level and construct at least 1 nuclear power plant to power the portal. You also need to maintain the crisis lower than 75%. There could be up to 2 scientists in the same game. A doomsday cultist basically just wants to sabotage the operation and prevent the power meter from reaching 100% because they believe the prophecy has come true and the end times are coming. The warlord basically just wants war. So their goal is to win 5 wars before the end of the game and have at least some power production. You are chaotic good, so you want to maintain crisis between 50% and 75%. For both of these, the warlord and the doomsday cultist, there's up to 1 per game.
So right now we'll introduce the event card. Just a reminder, the event card will be randomly drawn when crisis meter or power meter reach 25, 50, or 75%. This event card will quickly change the landscape of the game and make the game more interesting. Oh no, what's just get bad just get worse. Global warming acceleration. This event will immediately increase the 10-point crisis. New battery technology. This is great news for anyone who is not a doomsday cultist. This will increase 10 power to the power meter. Peace agreement. This is very bad news for the warlord. Everybody need to calm down right now because the cost of the war just double for next 4 terms. Regional conflicts. For next 4 terms, it will increase 6 crises per term. However, the peacekeeping cost also reduced to 1 goal. Resource shortage. This is really bad news because the amount of resource card you can draw is reduced by 1 now until the end of the game. Resource influx. You can draw 1 more resource card until the end of the game. Oh no, here comes the acid rain. You can no produce any new units for the next 4 term. Earthquake. Everyone has to destroy 2 units of their choice. It's really bad news for whoever owns the army because you have to destroy up to 2 armies for every single player. Oh, the global economy just get worse. Hyperinflations. Gold costs for all units and action double for everyone for the rest of the game. We just spot a huge solar flare struck Earth. The large amount of solar flare causes all existing units disabled for 4 terms except the solar plant, and the solar production generated by the solar plant is double for the next 4 terms instead.
What we found interesting in playtesting and observing player behavior is that the actions of the player reflect what happened in the real world. When players played selfishly and focused only on their own goal, it often leads to unmanageable crisis. The secretive goal also made players super cautious of each other and engage players based on their actions and perceived intentions. When players misunderstood others' intentions or they found others' intentions misaligned with theirs, it often led to player conflict. For example, one capitalist player found the other player collecting a large amount of gold. He started disabling the player's units and hindering the player's ability progress. However, in the end, he lost to a doomsday cultist's evil plan and found out that he was hindering an environmentalist trying to reduce the crisis. In terms of international appeal, the game uses a lot of symbolic design. There are not specific to any culture, and also will be a good educational tool for children in developing countries to teach them the balance between sustainability and development.
Right now, we will show you a demo gameplay. So the full length of this footage, that's about 1 hour. So I will go through some interesting point and some of my decision-making step, and I will also show you some interesting thing happened that during the game. So in the beginning of the run, I draw an identity card of a power tycoon. So as a power tycoon, I basically need to be the person who make the most power in the end of the game while keeping the crisis meter lower than 75%. And for my first resource draw, I got a silicon and a gold. This is pretty lucky for Power Tycoon, so this means right away I can get a solar power plant. This means I can right away put down one get +1 power. It's already ahead of everybody else. So it's very important in your first run to see what other people does and trying to deduce what's their identity. Because then you might know who will be your competition and then what you should do for your long-term strategy. Player 2 here unfortunately did not get any desired resources. So we're just gonna fast forward through this until the player 3 actions. So player 3 purchased a university. So this is quite interesting because usually people doesn't really purchase university right away unless they are going for something. So I will keep an eye on player 3, this player yellow here. Once again, it's my turn right now. So I draw 2 silicons. So 2 silicon can't really get you anything unless I really want you to go for long-term like resource planning. So, but I was just gonna wanna hold out for some to get more information, so I can actually make more effective use of my resources. Once again, it's yellow player's turn, so he is the only one have purchasing their unit so far, so he's actually the one I'm pretty much have the eye on. So he purchased another university. Well, so this is my reasoning, right? If he's a warlord, he really wants to build a cheap army forces. He will probably just get a military academy right away. However, he's piling onto more university. Mm, this is a bit of my concern, so I'm highly suspicious he's a scientist at the time. So why? So let's think about this. Actually, this is why there is role design come into effect. So why does scientists have kind of interest conflict with power tycoon, right? So scientists' main goal is building a nuclear reactor in the end, and then the power tycoon needs produce the most power in among all players. A nuclear power plant produces 20 powers. So in order for Power Tycoon to win, I actually need to have more than 20 power if I will let him to build a nuclear plant by the end. I mean, this is one choice, and another choice is I also go for nuclear plant as well, which gonna cost a lot of resources in the way. So right now, I'm really looking out for yellow player's move, and he will be my primary concern, and I really want to see how he act next turn. So very fortunately, I got 2 golds and along with the 2 silicons. I was thinking about first I want to build up a university myself so I can actually upgrade my solar plants. So I actually have more effective, uh, basically effective power down the line. But since I am kind of suspecting player 3 will be the scientist, so I actually gonna go for more aggressive power progression. So I'm debating if I should purchase this oil plants with my second buying cap. So right now I actually do have enough resources for an oil plant. I can trade in 1 gold and 1 silicon to get oil, and as I do so right now. And so compare for my power versus crisis concern right now. So right now I have a 1 oil plant and a 1 solar plant. So I will produce the same amount of power and crisis each turn. This looks very balanced, but it's in truth it's really not. So my goal is to managing the crisis meter lower than 75%. So I cannot just go full on same crisis or same power because eventually it will get out of control. And just a reminder for you, I'm not the only player here. There's also other players. They might generate more crisis. It will end up might have more crisis than I can afford. And also there will be the event card come into play. So this really aggressive power progression is actually quite risky because first of all, resources are really limited. If I commit too much on the power production, I might lose my crisis control very quickly. So in the past turn there, I just upgrade my oil plant to level 2, so I can actually produce power more effectively and produce more powers. Right now I'm still in the leading player who produces power, so this is in my favor and I'm in a good track. And now the player I worry most, yellow player, just purchased another university, so have a level 3 science, and he has a couple of absorption plan. So from his intention of managing crisis and aggressively progress through science, I basically confirm he is the scientist. So this is very interesting, right? The scientist is actually do not have like a direct conflict with Power Tycoon, but the Power Tycoon's goal and the scientist's goal have are conflicted. So it's unlike two Power Tycoon fighting for each other, which is whoever can have more power. For scientists, it's a bit more simpler than that because scientists' final goal is to build a nuclear power plant, which generates a lot of powers. And for me, I don't really need to destroy his power plant, so I can let him win as long as I have more than 20 powers by the end of the game. But there's a things. The conflict, the tension is not just between me and the player yellow, the scientist player here. As I start ramping up my power productions, the power meter or the crisis meter actually will increase very fast. Um, this will be a very indirect player tension between me and the player red and the player green here, because as the game speed up, they have less time to finish their goal basically. So right now I'm basically observing the player, or just making sure it is the scientist I was thinking. So right now the player red and the player green have doesn't really know my intention just yet, and as I ramping up my power production, you will see the game gonna start progressing much faster. So here we cut to later on in the game. So as you can see, as I really start ramping up my power production, I quickly push the power meter over 25. So right now we'll draw our first event card. Acid rain is very unfortunate right now for everyone. So nobody can produce any new units. They can still upgrade, but they cannot produce any units for the next 4 player turn. So as you can see, this event card can really shifting the tide of a game. So if you are planning to making a unit in the next run, unfortunately you have to wait one more. So like the player action might change dramatically. So I'm also have another, because at the same time I will also generate crisis. So another event card is being drawn because I also push the crisis meter over 25% and hyperinflation. It's a very very bad news for people who needs a lot of gold for building their stuff. So the hyperinflation double the gold cost for all units at the rest of the game. So it's it's a good news for me because the scientist the amount of gold required for scientists to build a nuclear power plant is actually quite a bit. So it's really hinder scientists to wait for him to um, achieve his goal. But at the same time, he do have most of his infrastructure built already, which is all his university. Also, since their hyperinflation only affect the cost. So, for example, for the trading as the resource expedition, he actually doesn't affect that. So he can still pretty effectively get his uranium and get ready for the nuclear power plant. So this is a much later stage of the game. As you can see, the power meter already grow to 79 and the crisis meter is grow to 64. And we have actually quite more, a couple event card is being drawn. So right now I'm in a pretty good spot. I have a decent amount of power production, pretty much higher than everybody else. And the scientists right now do not seem on a really good track to actually obtain the nuclear power plants. Um, but the crisis is actually growing quite a bit. So for me right now, my main objective it will be managing the crisis, and for that I building up an army. So I could using the peacekeeping agreement to rapidly reduce the crisis, at least managing in a proper level. So right now, I think we are under the effect of resource shortages. So I can only draw one oil at a time. So I cannot really to perform the peacekeeping agreement. And as you can see, we are rapidly approaching the end of the game, and their power is grow from 92, and the crisis is just pushing through to 77. And another event card being drawn is the power influx. It's actually resource influx. So that and the resource shortage actually cancel out each other. So we will go back to drawing two resource cards at the same time. So this is where my downfall is. This okay. Right now I was thinking, okay, their power meter is growing over 75%, but still in a pretty good spot. But maybe within a couple runs, and I still in a pretty good chance to actually control it. But I actually didn't know that the red play here is a warlord. I was thinking from his behavior, and I actually mostly focused on the yellow player. I wasn't really confirming his true intention, but well, soon enough you will see. Because he is also seeing the game gonna end really soon, since the power pretty much is growing out of proportion. So he start attacking my units because he need to wage war on us. Well, and he targeting my uh, power plant. So unfortunately, this is my miscalculation, and this will actually resolve the downfall of me. So as my oil plant get destroyed, pretty much I'm out of the game right now, because when the next turn come around to next couple players, their game will pretty much end with power meter push over 100%, and then he wage another war on me, and another of my oil plant get destroyed. We'll fast forward here. So pretty much at this stage of game, you can pretty much tell if you can win or not. So in the last part, the red player is getting ready of his final couple unit to meet a requirement. Maybe he could actually pull it through. Right now with power stand at 99 and the crisis stand at 87. And yeah, the power is reaching 100% and the crisis at 87. So I reveal I'm a power tycoon, and I was really surprised the red player is the warlord right here. And so oh yeah, and actually the green player is the capitalist, and he's showing the amount of gold he has right now. So he has 4 golds. He is the player with highest amount of gold in the field. And unsurprisingly, yes, as I guess it right, the yellow player it is the scientist, but um, he cannot achieve his final objective. So yep. So right now we have the final winner of we only have one winner in this game. Is actually the capitalist who is secretly, he's quite quiet during the games. He's actually making his money. So would you double confirm? So the red player only have 3 gold and the green player have 4 gold. So the winner of this game will be the green player. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you're enjoying our resource management card game, Beyond Earth. If you have any questions or comments, please leave it down below or in the Canvas discussion board.